The morning sun was just breaking through the clouds when James pulled his Honda into the parking lot of Prestige Motors. It was one of those fancy dealerships where every car on the floor probably cost more than most people made in a year. Chrome and glass everywhere, with luxury vehicles gleaming under the bright showroom lights. James wasn't there to buy a car, though. At least not today. He had a different reason for being there. One that nobody in that building knew about yet. See, just 3 days ago, James had finalized the purchase of this entire dealership through his investment company. The papers were signed, the money transferred, and technically he owned every square inch of this place. But he wanted to see how things really worked before anyone knew who he was. So there he was, dressed in his old college sweatshirt and comfortable jeans. He'd been out for his morning run and figured this was the perfect time to stop by. No suit, no tie, no announcement. Just a regular guy walking into a car dealership on a Tuesday morning. The moment he stepped through those glass doors, he could feel eyes on him. The showroom was massive, with at least a dozen cars spread across the polished floor. A couple of salespeople stood near the back, chatting and laughing about something. A few customers were already there, well-dressed folks being attended to with big smiles and handshakes. James walked slowly through the aisles between the cars, running his hand along the smooth paint of a silver sedan. He watched how the staff interacted with customers. Who got approached first? Who got ignored? How long did people wait before someone came to help them? He was making mental notes of everything. The layout could be better. The waiting area looked tired and outdated. Some of the younger staff seemed enthusiastic, but others looked bored out of their minds. That's when he heard the voice behind him. "Can I help you find something?" The tone wasn't friendly. It wasn't even neutral. It had that edge to it, that way of speaking that makes it clear you're not really welcome. James turned around to see a man in his 40s, wearing a crisp white shirt with a name tag that read, Derek, Sales Manager. His arms were crossed, and he had this look on his face like he'd just smelled something unpleasant. "Yeah, actually," James said with a friendly smile. "I was looking at some of your luxury models. That Mercedes over there caught my eye." Derek glanced at the car James was pointing to, then back at James. He let out a small laugh, the kind that's meant to make you feel small. "That's a $120,000 vehicle," Derek said slowly, like he was talking to a child. "We get a lot of people who come in just to look at the expensive ones. You know, take pictures, dream a little. Nothing wrong with that, but we're pretty busy today with actual customers." James felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his cool. This was exactly the kind of thing he needed to see. This was the real culture of the place when nobody was watching. "I understand it's expensive," James replied calmly. "That's why I wanted to ask some questions about the features and financing options." Derek sighed dramatically and looked back at his colleagues, one of whom was smirking. "Look, man, I'm just trying to save us both some time here. These cars require excellent credit, substantial down payments, and proof of income. Maybe you'd be more comfortable at one of the pre-owned lots down the street. They've got some nice cars there that might be more in your range." A young woman standing nearby, one of the other salespeople, shifted uncomfortably. She looked like she wanted to say something but didn't. James nodded slowly. "So you're saying you won't answer my questions about the Mercedes?" "I'm saying I've been in this business for 15 years, Derek said, his voice getting louder. "And I can tell when someone's serious and when someone's just wasting time. We've got people who actually want to buy cars today, and I need my team focused on them. I'm sure you understand." Other people in the showroom were starting to notice now. A couple in their 60s stopped their conversation with another salesperson to watch. A man examining an SUV turned to look. James pulled out his phone. "Would it be possible to speak with the general manager?" Derek's expression hardened. "The general manager is busy. And honestly, you're starting to become a problem here. I've been polite, I've tried to direct you somewhere more appropriate, but you're not taking the hint." "The hint?" James asked quietly. "Yeah, the hint," Derek said, stepping closer. "This isn't the place for you. These aren't your kind of cars. And if you don't leave on your own, I'm going to have to ask security to escort you out." The showroom had gone almost silent now. Everyone was watching this unfold. The young saleswoman looked horrified. An older employee was shaking his head but said nothing. James stood there for a moment, looking around at all the faces staring at him. He thought about revealing who he was right then and there. It would be so easy. But no, he wanted to see how far this would go. He wanted to see if anyone would step in, if anyone would do the right thing. "All right," James said finally. "I'll leave." Derek's face broke into a satisfied smile. Smart choice. Have a good day now. As James walked toward the door, he could hear Derek behind him speaking to the young saleswoman in a voice loud enough to carry. That's how you handle time wasters. You've got to be firm or they'll waste your whole morning. James pushed through the glass doors and stepped back into the sunlight. His heart was pounding, not with anger, but with absolute certainty about what needed to happen next. Tomorrow was going to be a very different kind of day at Prestige Motors. James sat in his car for a moment, taking deep breaths. His hands gripped the steering wheel as he processed what had just happened. He'd experienced this kind of treatment before in his life, but it never got easier. The assumptions, the dismissiveness, the way Derek had looked at him like he didn't belong. But he wasn't some random customer who could be brushed aside and forgotten. He was the owner, and tomorrow everyone in that building would know it. He started his car and was about to pull out when he noticed something in his rearview mirror. Derek had come outside along with a security guard. They were walking quickly toward his car. James rolled down his window as they approached. Is there a problem? He asked calmly. Derek leaned down and the security guard, a heavy-set man with a stern expression, stood behind him with his arms crossed. Yeah, there's a problem, Derek said. You were taking pictures in there. Of our cars, our showroom. That's not allowed without permission. James hadn't taken any pictures except for one quick shot of Derek's name tag that Derek clearly hadn't noticed, but he could see where this was going. I took one photo of a name tag, James said. For reference. Is that against the law? It's against our policy, Derek shot back. And honestly, your whole attitude in there was suspicious. We have expensive vehicles and we've had problems with people casing the place before. So I'm telling you right now, don't come back here. If you show up again, we'll call the police for trespassing. The security guard nodded along, backing up every word Derek said. James could feel his anger rising but kept his voice level. I'm suspicious because I wanted to ask questions about a car? You're suspicious because you were acting strange, refusing to leave when asked and taking unauthorized photos, Derek said, his voice getting louder. Look, I don't know what your deal is, but this is private property, and I'm the sales manager here. I have the authority to ban anyone I want, so consider yourself banned. A few other employees had gathered near the showroom windows watching the confrontation in the parking lot. James could see the young saleswoman from earlier, her hand over her mouth looking genuinely distressed. Got it, James said quietly. I'm banned. Good, Derek said, standing up straight with a satisfied smile. Have a nice life. As Derek and the security guard walked back toward the building, James saw Derek say something that made the security guard laugh. They high-fived before going back inside. James pulled out his phone and made a call. Hey, Catherine, he said when his lawyer picked up. Yeah, I'm good. Listen, I need you to move up the timeline. Tomorrow morning. Get everyone together for the announcement meeting. All staff mandatory. 9 a.m. sharp. He listened to her response, then smiled for the first time since the incident. Trust me, we can't wait any longer. I'll explain everything tomorrow. Just make sure the HR director is there too. We're going to need her. After hanging up, James drove home. The rest of the day he couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. But he also thought about that young saleswoman. The way she'd looked uncomfortable the whole time. The way she'd seemed like she wanted to say something but didn't. How many other good employees were working in that toxic environment? How many customers had been treated the same way he was? That evening, James reviewed the dealership's files that his team had compiled during the acquisition process. Customer complaints, employee records, sales data. Everything was there in black and white, and there it was. Derek Hammond's file. 15 years with the company, as he'd said, but also 6 formal customer complaints in the last 3 years alone, all from customers claiming discrimination or unfair treatment. Each complaint had been marked as resolved or customer misunderstanding by the previous owner. James shook his head. Those complaints hadn't been resolved. They'd been swept under the rug. He barely slept that night. His mind kept replaying the scene. Derek's smug face, the security guard's threatening posture, the other employees who'd just watched it happen. The next morning, James woke up early. He put on his best suit, a charcoal gray 3-piece that he'd had custom tailored. He chose a crisp white shirt and a dark blue tie. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man from yesterday's confrontation. He arrived at Prestige Motors at 8:30, 30 minutes before the mandatory meeting. Catherine, his lawyer, was already there, along with Patricia from HR. They'd set everything up in the main conference room. "Everyone's been notified," Catherine said. "They think it's just a routine corporate announcement about the ownership change." "Good," James said. "Let's keep it that way." At exactly 9 o'clock, employees started filing into the conference room. James stayed in the smaller office next door, watching through the window. He saw Derek swagger in, coffee in hand, joking with a few other salespeople. The security guard from yesterday was there too, looking bored. Then James saw her, the young saleswoman. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her notepad. She sat near the back, away from Derek's group. At 9:15, when everyone was seated, Catherine stood up at the front of the room. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming on short notice. As you know, Prestige Motors has recently been acquired by Falcon Investment Holdings. I'm here today to introduce you to the new owner." Derek leaned back in his chair, whispering something to the person next to him. They both smirked. Catherine continued. "The new owner has extensive experience in the automotive industry and is committed to making this dealership a model of excellence and customer service. Please welcome James Patterson." The door opened and James walked in. The room fell completely silent. James watched as recognition slowly dawned on Derek's face. The color drained from his cheeks. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The security guard sat up straight, his confident posture crumbling. The young saleswoman in the back gasped quietly, her eyes wide. James walked to the front of the room, standing next to Catherine. He buttoned his suit jacket and looked around at every face in that room. Some looked confused. Some looked curious. Derek and his group looked terrified. "Good morning," James said calmly. "I'm sure some of you recognize me from yesterday. For those who don't, let me tell you a story about my first visit to my own dealership." James stood at the front of the conference room, watching the reactions ripple through the crowd. Some employees looked genuinely shocked. Others seemed confused, trying to piece together what was happening. But Derek looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. "Yesterday morning," James began, his voice calm and measured, "I walked into this dealership wearing casual clothes. I just finished my morning run, and I wanted to see how this business operates when nobody knows the owner is watching. You could hear a pin drop. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. I was interested in looking at the Mercedes on the showroom floor. Just wanted to ask some questions, learn about the features, maybe discuss financing options. Normal customer stuff, right?" A few heads nodded slowly, but I never got to ask those questions. Instead, I was told that I was wasting everyone's time. I was told to go to a used car lot down the street because these cars weren't in my range. I was accused of just wanting to take pictures and dream. And when I asked to speak with the manager, I was threatened with removal by security. Derek's friend next to him slowly slid his chair a few inches away. The security guard, Tom, was staring down at his hands. Then, when I left peacefully, I was followed into the parking lot. I was accused of suspicious behavior and banned from ever returning to this property. "My own property?" A woman in the front row gasped. The young saleswoman in the back had tears in her eyes, though James couldn't tell if they were from relief or shock. "Now, I want to be very clear about something," James continued. "I'm not sharing this story to embarrass anyone or to play gotcha. I'm sharing it because it revealed something much bigger than one bad interaction. It revealed a culture where customers are judged by their appearance, where discrimination is not only tolerated but apparently celebrated." He pulled out his tablet and tapped the screen. The large monitor behind him came to life, showing a spreadsheet. "These are customer complaints from the past 3 years. 27 formal complaints. 17 of them describe experiences similar to mine. Customers who felt judged, dismissed, or discriminated against based on how they looked or spoke. Each one of these complaints was marked as resolved, but when my team investigated, we found that none of them were actually addressed. They were just filed away and forgotten." The room was completely silent except for the quiet hum of the air conditioning. "I want to introduce someone," James said, gesturing to Catherine. "This is Catherine Wells, my corporate attorney. Catherine has been reviewing all personnel files, all customer feedback, and all security footage from the past 6 months." Catherine stood up, her expression professional but firm. "Thank you, James. What we've discovered is a pattern of behavior that violates not only company policy, but also state and federal discrimination laws. We've identified multiple employees who have contributed to this hostile environment. Derek's hand was shaking as he reached for his coffee cup. He missed and nearly knocked it over. However, James said, taking back over, I also saw something else yesterday. I saw employees who looked uncomfortable with what was happening. I saw people who knew it was wrong but felt powerless to speak up. I saw at least one person who looked genuinely upset by what she was witnessing. The young saleswoman in the back, whose name tag read Nina, looked up with wide eyes. That tells me that not everyone here is part of the problem. In fact, I believe most of you aren't. Most of you probably come to work every day trying to do a good job, treat customers well, and earn an honest living. And for those people, I want you to know that you have a future here. Not just a future, but opportunities to grow and succeed in an environment that values integrity and respect. A few people visibly relaxed. The tension in the room shifted slightly. But, James said, his tone becoming more serious, for those who have created this toxic culture, who have discriminated against customers, who have made this workplace hostile, your time here is over. Patricia from HR stood up now. We'll be conducting individual meetings starting today. If you've been involved in any discriminatory behavior, if you've ignored complaints, or if you've actively contributed to the problems we've identified, you'll be meeting with me and James today. Derek stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is ridiculous, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I've given 15 years to this company. 15 years? And you're going to throw me under the bus because of one misunderstanding? It wasn't a misunderstanding, James said quietly. And it wasn't one incident. Sit down, Derek. You'll get your chance to talk in private. No, Derek said, his face flushed red. I'm not going to sit here and be humiliated in front of everyone. You know what? I don't even know if you're really the owner. How do I know this isn't some kind of scam? Where's Mr. Henderson? Where's the real owner? Mr. Henderson sold the dealership to my investment company 2 weeks ago, Catherine said, holding up a folder. The sale was finalized 5 days ago. All documents are legally binding and have been filed with the state. James Patterson is the legal owner of Prestige Motors. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. But I was just doing my job. I was protecting the dealership. From what? Nina suddenly spoke up from the back. Her voice was quiet but clear. Everyone turned to look at her. From a customer who wanted to ask questions about a car? Derek spun around to face her. Stay out of this, Nina. This doesn't concern you. Actually, it does concern her, James said. It concerns everyone in this room. Because every single person here is going to have to decide what kind of dealership they want to work at. One where everyone is treated with respect, or one where judgments are made based on appearance. Nina stood up, her hands trembling slightly. I've worked here for 8 months, and I've seen Derek treat at least a dozen customers the same way he treated you yesterday. I've wanted to say something so many times, but I was scared. I'm new, I need this job, and Derek always said that's just how the business works. It's not how the business works, James said firmly. It's not how any business should work. Other employees started shifting in their seats. A few were nodding. One older man in the middle row raised his hand. Yes? James acknowledged him. I'm Ronald, been here 22 years. I want to apologize. I've seen things that didn't sit right with me, and I should have spoken up. I got comfortable, stopped questioning things. That's on me, James nodded. Thank you for that honesty, Ronald. That's exactly the kind of accountability we need moving forward. Derek sat back down heavily, his face in his hands. All right, James said. Here's what happens next. We're going to take a short break. Catherine and Patricia will post a schedule for individual meetings. If your name is on that list, you'll meet with us today. For everyone else, there will be mandatory training sessions starting next week on customer service, workplace respect, and our new company values. He paused, looking around the room one more time. I didn't buy this dealership to punish people. I bought it because I believe in what it can become. A place where everyone, and I mean everyone, is treated with dignity. Where your worth isn't determined by what you're wearing or what you look like. Where good employees are recognized and promoted. That's the dealership we're going to build together. Who's with me? Slowly, people started to stand. First Nina, then Ronald, then a few others. Within a minute, more than half the room was on their feet. Derek remained seated, staring at the table in front of him. The meeting was over. But the real work was just beginning. The conference room emptied slowly. Some employees left quickly, heads down, avoiding eye contact. Others lingered, whispering to each other in small groups. Nina walked past James and gave him a small nod. He could see the relief written all over her face. Derek was one of the last to leave. He stood up slowly, smoothed down his shirt, and walked toward the door without looking at anyone. But James called out to him. "Derek, you're first. Conference room B, 5 minutes." Derek's shoulders slumped, but he nodded and walked out. Catherine leaned over to James. "Are you sure you want to do this yourself? Patricia and I can handle the terminations." James shook his head. "No, I need to do this. These people need to hear directly from me why this matters." 5 minutes later, James sat across from Derek in the smaller conference room. Patricia was there too, with a folder in front of her. Derek looked smaller somehow, less confident than he had just 24 hours ago. "Derek," James began, "I've reviewed your file. 15 years with this company, like you said. Top sales numbers for 7 of those years. You've trained new employees, managed teams, and by all accounts, you know how to sell cars." Derek looked up, a flicker of hope crossing his face. "But," James continued, "in the past 3 years alone, we have 6 documented customer complaints against you. All of them describe the same pattern. Customers who didn't look wealthy enough being dismissed, talked down to, or outright ignored." "Do you want to explain that?" Derek's jaw tightened. "Those were misunderstandings. People get upset when they can't afford the cars they want. They blame the salesperson instead of accepting reality." "Reality?" James asked. "The reality is that a woman came in here wearing scrubs from her nursing shift, and you told her she should look at economy cars. She ended up buying an $80,000 SUV from the dealership across town. A young guy in a tech startup hoodie asked about our luxury sedans, and you laughed at him. He bought 2 cars for his company, neither from us." Patricia slid a document across the table. "These are statements we've collected over the past week, from other employees. Would you like to read them?" Derek glanced at the paper but didn't pick it up. "People are just protecting themselves, throwing me under the bus to save their own jobs." "Actually," Patricia said calmly, "most of these statements are from people who aren't in any trouble at all. They're from employees who witnessed your behavior and felt uncomfortable, but didn't know how to report it. Some of them mentioned being scared of retaliation from you." Derek's face went red. "That's garbage. I never retaliated against anyone. Nina said you cut her commission by reassigning her customer to yourself after she spent an hour helping them, just because she took too long on the sale. Is that true?" Derek was quiet for a moment. "That customer wasn't ready to buy. I closed the deal. I deserved that commission. The customer specifically asked for Nina when they came back," Patricia said. "According to the receipt, they were upset when you took over the sale instead." James leaned forward. "Derek, here's the thing. You're not being fired because of what happened to me yesterday. I mean, that alone would be enough. But you're being fired because of a pattern of behavior that's been damaging this business for years. You've cost us customers, you've created a hostile work environment, and you've violated company policy repeatedly. So that's it?" Derek said bitterly. 15 years down the drain because of some complaints?" "No," James said firmly. 15 years down the drain because you chose to treat people poorly based on how they looked. You had plenty of chances to change. Every complaint was an opportunity to reflect and do better. Instead, you convinced yourself that you were right and everyone else was wrong." Patricia opened her folder. "These are your termination papers, effective immediately. You'll receive 2-week severance pay as per company policy, but you need to clear out your desk today. Your access codes and keys need to be turned in before you leave the building." Derek stared at the papers like they might catch fire. "And what am I supposed to tell people? How do I explain this to my next employer?" "That's up to you," James said. "But I'll tell you this. If anyone calls us for a reference, we're required by law to be honest about why you were terminated. Discrimination and creating a hostile workplace aren't things we can hide." Derek's hands were shaking as he signed the papers. When he finished, he stood up and looked directly at James for the first time. "You know what's funny?" Derek said, his voice bitter. "I bet you felt real proud of yourself walking in here in your hoodie, setting this whole trap. This was all just some power trip for you." James stood up too, meeting his eyes. "No, Derek, this wasn't a trap. I genuinely wanted to see how my business operated. And what I saw broke my heart. Because you could have just treated me like a human being. You could have answered my questions, shown me respect, and done your job. That's all it would have taken. But instead you made assumptions based on nothing but what I was wearing. Derek grabbed his papers and headed for the door. As he reached for the handle, he turned back. You think you're going to change everything? This is how dealerships work. This is how sales works. You'll figure that out soon enough. No, James said quietly. That's how your dealership worked. That's not how mine will. After Derek left, Patricia let out a long breath. That was harder than I expected. Yeah, James agreed. But necessary. Who's next? Tom, the security guard. Tom's meeting was shorter. He'd followed Derek's orders without question, but his file was otherwise clean. James gave him a choice. Tom, you did what your supervisor told you to do. I get that. But you also have a responsibility to think for yourself, especially in security. If someone tells you to remove a person who's not causing any real problem, you need to question that. So here's your choice. Accept a formal written warning. Go through retraining on proper security protocols and discrimination awareness and keep your job. Or you can leave today with severance. Tom didn't hesitate. I'll take the training. Sir, I'm really sorry. I should have asked more questions. I won't make that mistake again. Okay, James said. Patricia will get you set up with the training schedule. The rest of the day was a blur of meetings. 2 other salespeople who had similar complaint patterns were terminated. One manager who had consistently ignored and dismissed complaints was let go. Each meeting was difficult, but James knew it was necessary. By 6 o'clock, James was exhausted. He sat alone in his new office, looking out at the showroom floor. It looked different now. Emptier in some ways, but maybe cleaner too. Like they'd started to clear out the rot. There was a soft knock on the door. Nina stood there looking nervous. Mr. Patterson, do you have a minute? Of course, come in. And please call me James. Nina sat down on the edge of the chair. I just wanted to say thank you. I've been working in car sales for 2 years, and this is the first place where I actually feel like I can do my job without compromising who I am. You shouldn't have to compromise who you are anywhere, James said. That's the whole point. I know. But most places aren't like that. She paused. I also wanted to ask, are you really serious about the promotions and opportunities? Because I have ideas. Lots of them. About how we could do things better. James smiled for the first time all day. I'm absolutely serious. In fact, let's schedule a meeting for tomorrow. I want to hear every single one of those ideas. Nina's face lit up. Really? Okay. Yes, thank you. After she left, James looked back out at the showroom. Tomorrow would be different. Not perfect, but different. Better. And that was a start. 3 months had passed since that unforgettable day at Prestige Motors. The dealership looked almost the same on the outside, but inside, everything had changed. James walked through the showroom on a Saturday afternoon, hands in his pockets, wearing jeans and a casual button-down shirt. He'd made it a habit to dress casually at least twice a week, just to see how things were really going. But now nobody treated him differently because of it. More importantly, nobody treated any customer differently because of it either. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to Prestige Motors. My name's Kevin. Is there anything specific you're looking for today, or would you like to browse a bit? James watched from a distance as one of their newer salespeople greeted an elderly man in worn overalls and muddy boots. The customer looked surprised by the warm welcome, like he'd expected something different. Well, the man said slowly, I've been saving up for a while. Thought I might finally get myself a decent truck, but I don't want to waste your time if I'm just looking. Sir, you're not wasting anyone's time, Kevin said with a genuine smile. That's what we're here for. Let me show you what we have, and we'll figure out what works best for you and your budget. No pressure, I promise, James smiled. Kevin was one of the people they'd hired during the rebuilding process. Young, enthusiastic, and most importantly, he treated everyone with the same respect. James! He turned to see Nina walking toward him, tablet in hand. She'd been promoted to sales team leader 6 weeks ago, and she'd absolutely flourished in the role. Her ideas had transformed how they approached customer service. How's it going? James asked. Really good. I wanted to show you this month's numbers. She pulled up a spreadsheet on her tablet. We're up 23% from the same period last year. But more importantly, our customer satisfaction scores have gone from 71% to 94%. 94. James whistled. That's incredible. And look at this. Nina swiped to another screen. Remember how we started that community partnership program? The one where we connect with local organizations? We've had 47 customers come in through those referrals. People who said they'd never felt comfortable in a car dealership before. James felt a warmth in his chest. This was exactly what he'd hoped for. There's more, Nina continued, her excitement growing. 3 of the people we hired from the community program are outselling some of our veterans. Turns out when you hire people who understand what it's like to be underestimated, they connect with customers in amazing ways. Ronald, the veteran employee who'd apologized during that first meeting, walked over to join them. James, got a minute? Of course, Ronald looked a bit emotional. I just wanted to tell you something. Yesterday, a black family came in, parents and their college-age daughter. They were looking for a car for the daughter's graduation gift. The dad pulled me aside and said this was the 3rd dealership they'd visited. At the other 2 places, they were ignored for over 20 minutes while salespeople helped other customers who came in after them. James felt his jaw tighten. That's terrible. Yeah, but he said the moment they walked in here, Kevin greeted them immediately. Treated them like VIPs. The daughter fell in love with one of our sedans and they bought it on the spot. But before they left, the dad shook my hand and said, "Thank you for creating a place where my daughter feels valued. I've been in this business for 22 years, and that was the first time I really felt proud of where I work." Ronald's voice cracked a little. So thank you for not giving up on us, for showing us we could be better. After Ronald walked away, James had to take a moment. This was why it all mattered. Not just the sales numbers or the profit margins, but the real human impact. "Oh, I almost forgot," Nina said. "Someone's here to see you. She's waiting in your office." James headed to his office, curious. When he opened the door, he saw a woman in her 30s standing by the window, looking at the showroom floor. "Can I help you?" James asked. She turned around and there was something familiar about her face. "Mr. Patterson?" "I'm Diana. I don't know if you remember, but 2 years ago I filed a complaint about this dealership. I'd saved for months to buy my first new car, and the sales manager, Derek, told me I should stick to used cars because I didn't look like I could handle the payments." James remembered seeing her complaint in the files. "I remember reading about that. I'm so sorry that happened to you. I ended up buying from another dealership and I told everyone I knew to avoid this place. But then about a month ago, a friend told me things had changed here. She said she'd had the best car buying experience of her life at Prestige Motors. I didn't believe her at first," Diana smiled. "So I came in last week just to test it. I wore my regular work clothes, didn't dress up or anything, and your team treated me like I was the most important customer in the world. Nina spent over an hour with me, answering all my questions, never once making me feel rushed or judged." "I'm glad to hear that," James said. "I bought a car yesterday," Diana continued, "but I wanted to come back and meet you personally, to tell you that what you've done here matters. You didn't just change a business. You changed how people feel about themselves when they walk through these doors." James felt his throat tighten. "That means more to me than you know." After Diana left, James stood in his office for a while, looking out at the showroom. Kevin was still helping the man in overalls, and they were both laughing about something. Nina was training 2 new hires near the back. Tom, the security guard who'd been retrained, was helping an elderly woman carry her paperwork to her car. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Catherine, his lawyer. "Just got word that 3 former customers who'd had bad experiences have returned and made purchases. Word is spreading about the culture change. Well done." James thought back to that day 3 months ago, standing in this very spot after Derek had been escorted out. He'd wondered then if he was doing the right thing. If the changes would stick. If people would embrace a different way of doing business. Now he had his answer. That evening, as James was locking up, Nina called out to him from across the parking lot. "Hey, same time next week for the team strategy meeting? Wouldn't miss it," James called back. As he drove home, James passed by other car dealerships. Big ones, small ones, luxury brands, and economy brands. He wondered how many of them had their own Dereks. How many customers walked in every day and were judged before they even opened their mouths. But he also thought about the ripple effect. Some of their employees had friends and family working at other dealerships. They were sharing what they'd learned. Some customers were demanding better treatment at other places, saying Prestige Motors doesn't do it this way. Change was slow, but it was happening. James pulled into his driveway and sat in his car for a moment, reflecting on everything. 3 months ago, he'd been humiliated and kicked out of his own dealership. Today, that same dealership was becoming a model for how to do things right. He thought about Derek sometimes, wondered if he'd learned anything. Wondered if he'd ever understand that the problem wasn't James walking in wearing a hoodie. The problem was assuming that the hoodie told him everything he needed to know about the person wearing it. As James walked into his house, he smiled. Tomorrow he'd do it all over again. Keep pushing. Keep improving. Keep proving that treating people with dignity wasn't just the right thing to do. It was also the smart thing to do. And business had never been better.